Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm Anthony Tezak. As we end one budget cycle, another one begins. Here to talk to me about that and more is State Representative Jamie Santora. Representative, welcome.
Good morning, Anthony. Thanks for having me here.
Before we get into the governor's most recent budget address, last year's budget is still being talked about and some say it has not come to a conclusion yet. Can you give us just a little update on where we are with that?
Hey, you know what, I'm glad you brought that up because it's a concern of mine as well. And the reason why I say that is a budget was given to the governor. Is it exactly what I was looking for? Absolutely not. However, there was a $100 million increase in there for public basic education. Okay, there was a $20 to $25 million increase for pre-K and also money for special ed. All increases. And what happened was the governor chose to blue line that budget. But one of the areas where I believe he was either misguided by his administration or he just went a little too far was he blue lined education by $3 billion. That's a big, big concern of mine. And one of the things I've done is introduced a bill to restore that money. I'm not going to allow my want or desire for a $350 million increase to basic ed, a $50 million increase to special ed, and a $60 million increase for pre-K to get in the way of a $100 million increase to education that could go away tomorrow. There are some special interest groups out there that feel that this is great. The governor cut $6 billion out of a budget. Let's make this permanent. Let's make these cuts permanent. That's not a good idea.
Now, recently, the governor had his budget address for the upcoming new fiscal year. However, a lot of people have been saying this is as far from a budget address than it ever could have been.
It wasn't a budget address. It was a lecture. I think it was a lecture to the Republican members of both the House and the Senate. It was a lecture to the leaders of the House and the Senate. You know what? I learned back in fourth grade history that Pennsylvania is the same way as Washington. We have three separate branches of government. They're all equal. We have an executive, a legislative, and a judicial. We're part of the legislative branch. We are part of the process. In the Constitution, we vote on the budget. The governor presents it. The governor did not present his budget the other day. Everybody is well aware of that. We need to resolve some issues, but we're in a divided government right now. So we've got to compromise. I don't necessarily agree with everybody on the Republican side on certain things. I don't agree with people on the Democratic side, but there are a lot of common areas. We got to get those off the table. Let's at least get those things funded and move forward. So, but the governor came out with another $2.7 billion budget increase. And if you take the $500 million unresolved from this year, it's actually a little over a $3 billion budget increase. We're not going to get anywhere with that. When you start so far off, you're looking to compromise in the middle, you're not getting there. Let's get a true starting ground of where you finished this year, which was he was trying to get to 30.8 billion. Make that your starting line. So then maybe we can get somewhere and get something done. That is so important that we get things done, and we got to resolve last year and move forward on this year.
One of the big things that the governor did talk about in his address was that there is a structural deficit. However, as much as he was putting the effort on trying to explain that the deficit needed to be taken care of, he advocated for a lot more spending.
Yeah, you're not going to solve a structural deficit by spending more. What you need to do is solve that problem first, then look at other avenues. And the way you solve that problem is we go to every single department, we figure out where there is excess spending being done, and we eliminate it right off the bat. And then you go from there and you figure out other alternative revenues. I serve on the gaming board or gaming committee. And there's opportunities for some good revenues to come into the Commonwealth there. There's opportunities in other committees that I serve on that can bring in revenue that's not tax related. Now, at the end of the day, if we have to do a tax increase, we have better have searched high and low for everything that we can cut first. And the first place I'm not looking to cut is education. I'm just not going there. And the other piece that we talked about, when you looked at that spending plan, and everyone talked about the spending side, but they didn't talk about the tax increase, okay? So 2.7 to 3.2, however you want to look at it, $1 billion in new taxes. How much of that went to property tax reform? Not a penny. We've got a real issue. The people that have invested the most, their number one biggest investment is their home. And those property taxes are going to continue to rise. I heard if we don't do this, people's property taxes are going to rise. If you don't, give me my education funding, well, guess what? They're going to rise anyway. So let's do it the right way and cut property taxes. We've got to figure out this issue, and it's a bipartisan issue. I know I've said it to you, and in fact, I've said it to you many a time. House Bill 504 is still sitting in the Senate. There is an opportunity there to have the first shot at real property tax reform. In my district alone, my home school district, 47% reduction in the school taxes. That's significant, not only to the seniors, but to the working families.
Last year when the governor gave his first budget address, and you brought it up, property tax was a big component of that. However, as we went through negotiations, it seemed that to the governor, that became less of an important issue compared to an increase in spending. And now when we look at his plan this year, not only does he have an increase in the personal income tax, but he wants it to be retroactive 6 months. And I don't know any other way to look at it than when the governor's up there, it seems like he truly believes that Pennsylvanians can afford an increase, can afford to pay 6 months in back taxes, and they want to. Is that what you're hearing from your constituents?
Well, you know what? What I did was, as soon as I heard that, when we left the floor, I made 2 phone calls. One to a constituent of mine who is somebody that comes into the office often and calls often because they've got a lot of concerns. They live month to month. And I told them about this idea because one of their big issues, again, is increasing funding for schools. And I said, one of the plans, or the plan that the governor has put out, is this retroactive tax. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, we're going to now look backwards. So we get to June and we pass this. We're going to look backwards to January and have your employer go in and take out the taxes for that period of time that you did not pay. And he said, what? I said, that's exactly what's going to happen. He's like, no way, I can't do that. I'll lose my house. You cannot do that to me. I live, when I tell you that I live month to month, I live month to month. That's what he said. Then I called an employer, my former employer. I said, how would you like to have this discussion with your employees? You're going to go take, he's like, don't, he didn't believe me. He called me back later that night and saw it on the news and realized that I was not making a joke because my former employer is a big Democrat, but he couldn't believe it, and then he was shocked. And once he heard it on the news as well, he thought I was just trying to rile him up. And he's like, I can't do that to my employees. I'd have to figure out a different way. But he's like, how do I go back and take money out of their pocket? You can't do it. And I think the governor knows that.
Listening to him on the House floor, it seemed like he was chastising employees that worked for him. And he also made the comment, he's made the comment in the past about the speaker in regards to he did not get the votes for the package that the governor wanted, so that was dereliction of duty on the speaker's part. And then he said to the General Assembly, if you're not willing to make the hard choices, you need to go find another job. Is that where your constituents want to go, as far as an increase of spending for schools, that when we know that really money is not going to fix the issue with education?
It depends on the school districts. My school districts, I can rattle the three off: Haverford, Upper Darby, William Penn. They do need some more funding. Haverford gets a very little piece of the state share. Upper Darby gets a little better of a piece. However, I actually just had Chairman Saylor of the Education Committee down. You walk through my schools. In fact, I called it, I made a joke, the wealthier side of town. There's no wealthier side of town. We're a good middle class neighborhood. Our buildings are 60 years old. We don't have turf fields. We don't waste money. So if it's done properly and there's the accountability factor, the funding will solve the problem, because as long as there's accountability with that funding, and you merge those two together, you're going to get results. I've seen it in the past. I've seen it through my superintendents. When there was more funding for them, they were able to do more with it. They're going to hire learning support people. They're not going to go put them in a turf field. They're not going to go put central air in the building. That's not what we're about. So I really believe that's more of where you live, or who runs your school districts and who your school boards are, what their priorities are. And our priorities are educating children down in the 163rd.
Finally, we're in February right now. We know the June 30th deadline for the new budget. Where do we go from here?
I really hope that the governor and the leaders can get to work on this right away. Last year, there was a big delay before they started to get together to talk about where we go. That needs to happen immediately. There is obviously differences, and the reality is, we put that budget up tomorrow, it's gonna go down just like last year. 100% of the people are not going to vote for those taxes. It's going to be 100%. It's just too significant. Again, it comes down to where's your starting mark, and that 30.8. Had that gone through, would we have stayed consistent for the next year? That's the real question to be asked here. Does 30.8 get it done? I don't even know anymore. That's the thing. There's so many moving parts to this budget. Retroactive taxes. Is it sales tax? Is it income tax? There's 15 new taxes proposed. Let's figure it out. Let's get the priorities straight. Again, we're in a split government. It's about compromise. Take the top priority of the Republican legislator, take the top priority of the governor, and let's see if we can work through those. A lot of people want to work from the bottom up, get the small stuff done first. If we can get those two big priorities done, then I think we can get anything else done.
All right, Representative Santora, thank you for your take on the budget address. I know it's going to be a long, tough couple months, and look forward to having you back here and talking about this more.
Great, thank you.
That's all the time we have for today's program. If you have questions or concerns about any state government-related matter, Representative Santora's contact information will be on the screen in just a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join us next time for another edition of Legislative Report.